Have you ever like scrolled on your social media feed or have come across another homeschooling family and you're like, wow, that family really has it all put together. I wish I could do my homeschooling like that. You know, they have, their kids are learning Latin, they're reading classic literature, they're doing a hands-on experiment every single week. They're going to co-ops, they're involved in every possible sport out there. And you're just like feeling so lacking. Like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my family? What's wrong with what I'm doing? I think at some point we've all been there in our lives. We compare our families to another family, our home to another home, our journey to somebody else's journey. And something I've learned very quickly is that comparison is the fastest way to lose your joy, your energy, your confidence in whatever it is that you are doing with your family. So in today's video, I want to talk with you about why comparison is the worst thing that we can do to ourselves as homeschooling parents. So go ahead and grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and let's have a little chat. It doesn't matter what stage in life, especially in this day and age with social media and all that, it's very hard not to compare yourself to somebody else when you're constantly being bombarded with somebody else's life. Now, one thing that I really armed my mind with when we first started homeschooling was that I was not going to be comparing my family's homeschool experience to anybody else's, because I knew that my family's homeschooling journey was going to be one that was unique. We are homeschooling and working parents. My kids have had different experiences. They are different from one another. There is not one family that is exactly the same. So to try to compare yourself, your family, your unique situation to another's family unique situation, it's not gonna line up and is always going to wear you down. And I learned that very early on as a classroom teacher. I'd have to say my first 5 years of teaching, I did spend some time comparing myself to other teachers. And that really put some blinders on me, and I wasn't able to see all the good things that were happening in my classroom. And people would come in all the time, administrators would come into my classroom all the time to tell me what an amazing job I was doing. And I couldn't recognize that. I couldn't acknowledge that. I couldn't internalize that praise that they were giving me because I was so focused on what I thought was happening in other teachers' classrooms. And I would think in my mind, even though I wasn't seeing their classrooms, I had no idea what was going on. I was only passing by in the hallways. But in my mind, I had this idea of, oh my goodness, they have it all put together. Everything is always perfect. Everyone is always doing what they're supposed to be doing in their classrooms, when I was honestly just getting a 5-second glimpse of a certain portion in a day when my class was going by, which was when we were either going from my classroom to the lunchroom or my classroom to a special class. That was the only glimpse I was getting. I had no idea what was happening in their day, but I knew everything that was happening in my classroom all of the time. And it wasn't until I stopped looking at other people and what they were doing, or what I thought they were doing, honestly, because I wasn't even seeing what they were doing. It's what I thought in my mind that was happening in there. Once I stopped doing that and I started focusing on what was actually happening in my room, I started seeing all the wonderful victories, all the amazing learning that was happening, and how much my students were growing. So I stopped comparing myself to other people. Like, I just had to. And so much joy and excitement came out of that. The only person I started comparing myself to was myself. I started thinking, okay, 5 years ago, this is where I was at. This is where I am now. And oh my goodness, have I come a long way. And then I would look at my class at the time, and I wasn't comparing my class to last year's class. My class, we were looking at the growth that we were making that particular year. And when we would see at where we came to at the beginning of the year and how far we had come by Christmas or by spring break, it was amazing to see the growth that would happen in that time. So I'm only sharing that to say that, just compare yourself to yourself. Where were you at 2 months ago when you first started homeschooling? This is where you were at. This is where you are at now. Make it into small little gaps so that you can actually measure the growth that your kids are doing in your home, and you can see what's working and what's not working and adjust accordingly, because as you venture into this journey, it truly is a learning curve. Especially if you're starting off first at the very beginning, there's a lot of learning that's going to happen. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about your kids, and your kids are all different and all have different learning styles, and they're all at different grade levels. So there's always adjusting that is going to go on. You're going to find out that what works beautifully for one homeschooling family might not for another homeschooling family. And that's great because guess what? There's a variety of different resources out there, honestly, suited for any type of family, and you can break it up in any which way you want. The most important thing that I really want you to understand is that you weren't called to homeschool somebody else's family. You were called to homeschool your family. And that's the family that you need to focus on. And as long as we have that mindset, we're not going to let that comparison monster come and just drag us down. Comparison can sneak in so quietly and just do so much damage. Not just to you as a parent because you start feeling like you're not doing enough, but to your children, because then you start comparing your children to somebody else's children and start withholding them up to this different standard that you think is a standard that those kids are being held up to, and it starts creating this friction and this negative attitude towards homeschooling, and it quickly becomes very unhealthy. I want us to think about something. When we start comparing ourselves to other people and other people's situation, we stop celebrating all of the amazing things that are happening in our space because we start dwelling on all the things that are not happening in our space. Think about how safe your children are at home with you. Think about how much love you are instilling in them. And think about how much they are learning with you. That right there is irreplaceable. A feed, an Instagram perfect feed cannot replace that in your homeschool. You can't capture that in camera. You can't see that if you are focusing on somebody else's journey. For your children to get to learn from you every single day is something that is such a great blessing and so beautiful that it deserves to be embraced. Now make sure to stay tuned for my next video where I'm going to be sharing with you my 5 tips on how to avoid falling into this comparison trap. These are 5 things that I do here at home on my own to make sure that I stay focused on my own homeschooling journey and keep that joy and that encouragement alive. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And if there are any other homeschooling topics that you would like me to address, make sure to drop a comment below. I always love hearing from you, and I love sharing and connecting with you all. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.